Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Our webinar is Applying the NutrEval Test in Clinical Practice. Our speaker is Dr. Wayne Sedano, Director of Clinical Support and Education for Avexia Diagnostics. My name is Michelle Holmes. I'm the Director of Client Relations for Avexia and will be your moderator this evening. Dr. Sedano is a chiropractic physician, a diplomat of the American Board of Chiropractic Internists, and of the American Clinical Board of Nutrition. He's a certified functional and integrative medicine practitioner and is board certified in traditional naturopathy. After graduating from Texas Chiropractic College and Rutgers University in 1985, Dr. Sedano began treating patients in private practice while continuing postgraduate studies through Logan College, Townsend State University, and the Institute for Functional Medicine. In 2005, his focus shifted to teaching for the American Board of Chiropractic Internists, which led to his dedication to research and development in the areas of integrative and functional medicine. Dr. Sedano is the Director of Integrative Medicine Education for CIM and lectures and teaches throughout the world. Before we begin, I would like to encourage all of the participants to send any questions you may have during the webinar. Please type your question into either the chat or question box and send to organizer. We will respond to these questions before the end of presentation and will allow extra time if needed. The questions will also be considered tomorrow if we don't get them to them this evening. A common question is where you can find the recording of the webinar. I will send you a link tomorrow and it will be available on the website in Client Resources. You can just log into your account and click on Client Services. And if you're not a member, please join us at www.avexiadiagnostics.com. I will now turn over the presentation to Dr. Sedano.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. And as Michelle stated, I'm going to be talking about applying the NutrEval test in clinical practice. So let's get started. And there we go. Okay, what I want to do over the next two slides is give you an overview of tonight's webinar, just to kind of set the tone for tonight. First of all, the question becomes, why would you want to order a test like this? And as you can see on the slide, nutritional testing, it's a great tool to assess complex chronic illnesses, because individuals with complex chronic illnesses that have been obviously ill for many, could be months and years going on, they're going to definitely be low on nutrients, antioxidants, B vitamins, and so forth. And this test is going to give you the key nutrients from a personalized medicine perspective. And as you can see, ordering this test, or read on the slide here, it gives you targeted personalized nutrition. That's known as biochemical individuality. And what that means is that we are all biochemically different and need different vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So what this test is going to do is break down the needs of antioxidants, B vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, and even digestive support, particularly pancreatic enzymes, the need for pancreatic enzymes, and also the need for probiotics. So those are really the 5 key areas that this test provides, and that's a load of information. Next, I want to talk about, there are a difference in some of the tests. NutrEval is actually broken down into 2 tests you can read on the slide by the check marks. First is the NutrEval plasma test. Next is the NutrEval, it's FMV, that stands for first morning void. Both of those tests require urine and a blood sample. And you can also tack on genomic testing that can look for single nucleotide polymorphism, SNPs. You're probably familiar with that, particularly for methylation and so forth. And I'll talk about those in an upcoming slide. There's also a shorter version of this nutritional assessment tool, and it's called the ONE test, and that ONE stands for Optimal Nutritional Evaluation. Now, that's only urine is required for that. You're going to get a little less information, like there's not going to be any information on essential fatty acid evaluation, and it's a shorter version, but it's a good test nonetheless. So you have a choice of these 3 different tests, so I wanted to make you aware of that as well. Now, the question becomes, why choose the NutrEval test? And basically what it is, I'm repeating myself, I know, it's an advanced nutritional analysis, and it's going to reveal those nutritional imbalances, deficiencies, or inadequacies, and it's going to give you that targeted nutrition. And it's particularly helpful in individuals with complex chronic conditions. I want you to think about how nutrients drive chemical reactions in the body. They drive detoxification. They drive energy metabolism. if given enough time, individuals with chronic illness, they're not going to be detoxifying properly because the nutrients are more than likely going to be low in the body, so therefore they get sicker and sicker and sicker. And this test could set the platform on what you need to do to replete the individual, get their nutritional status back up so the detoxification is working properly, their energy metabolism, the mitochondria is working properly, and they have the proper amount of fatty acids, which are certainly needed for the red blood cell membrane and membranes throughout the entire body. And also remember that proper amount of essential fatty acids and in the proper balance act as anti-inflammatory substances. So this test gives you a lot of really good information. So if you have patients that we all are seeing mood disorders like anxiety, depression, fatigue, GI complaints, chronic pain's a biggie to order this test, by the way, and chronic inflammation, individuals with migraine, musculoskeletal conditions, cardiovascular risk. This test also gives you an outline of the risk of cardiovascular disease. Individuals having problems with weight issues, if you're prescribing a dietary program for a patient, this can give you a guideline on targeted nutrition. Also, just for general health, patients come in, I want to maintain my health and actually feel better. Great test to do for targeted nutrition. And on the other end of the spectrum, sports fitness optimization. If you're treating athletes, this is a great test to make sure the athletes are replete with nutrition, especially performance athletes. Endurance athletes, because they may tend to be low by using up a lot of antioxidants and so forth. So you can get an idea of keeping their fitness at optimal levels. So this test really spans the gamut of why you would consider ordering a type of NutrEval test and also the one test as well. Now, the difference between the two tests I want to talk about, I'll talk about that on the next slide, but I want you to look at what is analyzed on the NutrEval test. Now, on the top, you're going to see NutrEval. That's the first morning void profile, and these are the main categories of analytes. First, on the first bullet you see is, and I'll just point it out right here, metabolic analysis, and that's via an organic acid test. Then there's going to be urinary amino acid analysis. It's going to look at essential and non-essential amino acids, plus some of the intermediary metabolites. It's going to look at the fatty acids, like I talked about. It's going to look at oxidative stress levels, and it's going to look at elemental markers, looking at both essential nutrients such as magnesium and potassium, so forth, and calcium, but also toxic elements such as cadmium would be one, lead, and mercury. Now, with the NutrEval plasma profile, what happens is that the urine amino acid analysis, that's going to be replaced with that's going to be replaced with the plasma amino acids. And this slide right now is going to show the difference between the two. Now, the plasma amino acids, and again, that's the difference in which amino acids are going to be looked at. The plasma is going to look at the plasma amino acids, and the first morning void is going to look at the urinary amino acids. If your patient comes in with a history of more mood disorders or neurobehavioral disorders, you may want to look at the plasma amino acids. If they're more of digestive issues, particularly protein digested, you probably want to order the first morning void because you're going to get more targeted information. So that's the main difference between those two tests. On the bottom, you can also add, where it says on the bottom here, some genomic markers, which are extremely important. They can help you enhance that personalized therapy if there's SNPs or mutations of, you're probably familiar right now with the MTHFR, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme. That's the one that's involved in methylation. If there are SNPs or if that gene is not working properly, there may be an increased need for B12, folic acid, so forth. The next one is the COMT enzyme, and that stands for catechol methyltransferase. That's involved in detoxification. It's also involved in metabolism of neurotransmitters, in particular epinephrine and norepinephrine. It's also involved in metabolism of estrogens, which is extremely important. So if there's a SNP there, that enzyme may not be working very well. The other assessment and genomic biomarkers is you see here TNF alpha. That stands for tumor necrosis alpha. If there is, and that's actually a cytokine telling the cells how to react, particularly the immune cells. if there is a mutation where that particular cytokine is not working properly, it has been associated with irritable bowel syndrome, or inflammatory bowel syndrome, also psoriasis and Alzheimer's if there's dysregulation of TNF-alpha. Patients will complain of inflammation, so forth. The next one that you can add on, and that stands for apolipoprotein E. And if there is polymorphisms or genetic variations in the apolipoprotein E, that's a sign of cardiovascular risk. Also macular degeneration and Alzheimer's. So you can tack those on as well to get more personalized nutrition, because if these SNPs show up and genetic polymorphisms show up, you can target nutritional therapies. They may need more B12, folic acid, and so forth. That's where these genetic markers can come in very handy. So over the next couple of slides, just did a breakdown of really what's involved in these tests, mainly the NutrEval plasma and urinary amino acid tests, or the first morning void test. Like I said, just remember that the one test only requires urine, and it's a scaled down version, but you do get a lot of good information. So what you get back on the test, and I'll show you a sample copy coming up in several slides here, but what you'll get back is a look at the malabsorption and dysbiosis markers. It'll give you an idea of, is there bacteria dysbiosis going on in the gut? Is there yeast fungal dysbiosis going on in the gut? You'll have markers for that. Markers for energy metabolism, meaning B12, B6, folic acid, and so forth, and metabolites of the mitochondria. Make sure the mitochondria is up and running, because that's our source of energy, the production of ATP. Fatty acid metabolism, neurotransmitter metabolites, vitamin markers. Also, there's going to be markers of toxins and detoxification. And finally, tyrosine metabolism. Now, they've included that because tyrosine is a very important amino acid. I mean, they all are, but tyrosine is involved in, first, as you're probably aware of, is it helps, it's the precursor for thyroid hormones. It's the precursor for natural pain substances, and particularly enkephalins. You need tyrosine, and it needs to be metabolized properly. And also tyrosine is needed for dopamine, epinephrine, and norepinephrine metabolism. That is the precursor. So this gives you an idea of what is going on with tyrosine metabolism and where you can affect the metabolism, so tyrosine can get converted into those thyroid hormones, natural pain substances, the enkephalins I talked about, and also the dopamine and epinephrine and norepinephrine. So very powerful information. Again, the first morning void, that's going to look at the urinary amino acids. That's more for protein digestion, and the plasma is going to look at more. It's going to look at the plasma amino acids more for mood and neuro behavioral problems. So, which I mentioned, and it's kind of good to repeat that several times so you really get the gist of what the value of this test. Now, you're going to get a look at the essential and metabolic fatty acids. It's going to give you the omega-3, omega-6, and omega-9 substances and how much your patient has. What it does, it looks at the cell membrane and does an analysis and saying, because that's where most of the fatty acids are found. So it'll give you an idea, and you're probably familiar with if there's a high omega-6 fatty acids, meaning arachidonic acid, in the system, that's been pitching us more towards an inflammatory state as opposed to an anti-inflammatory state. So that's the balance between omega-3 and omega-6. But it also goes a little bit further and gives you some information on this monosaturated fats, the omega-7 fat, and that's a new one that's been getting a lot of, and I have a slide coming up on that. I want to talk about that. Trans fats, which we know are bad news, margarine that jams up the whole system. It also looks at this enzyme. It's called the delta-6 desaturase activity. Now, that enzyme is important for converting essential fatty acids into the eicosanoids, and they may sound familiar. Those are the anti-inflammatory properties of the essential fatty acids. If this enzyme is not working properly or it's decreased, you're not going to get a good flow or good metabolism of the fatty acids. This enzyme is dependent on zinc and magnesium and a couple of other cofactors as well. And like I mentioned earlier, the fatty acids are going to give you an idea. They'll do ratios of omega-6 to omega-3, arachidonic acid, EPA, and also what's known as the omega-3 index. That can give you information about your patient in regard to cardiovascular risk. something that you can show your patient and encourage them to follow your prescription for nutrition, for diet and lifestyle changes. So a lot of good information. I just pulled this article and put it on here for you to take a look at. This has to do with that omega-7, so it'd be kind of fun to talk about that for a minute. And what that's known as is palmitoleic acid, omega-7. Now, it's a 16 carbon. Let me just point that out right here. And the double bond is on the 7 carbon, which is why it's an omega-7. And what they did with this particular essentially fatty acid, and it's found high in macadamia oil and also sea buckthorn oil, and that's a plant oil. They even did a lot of research. This comes out of the Journal of Clinical Lipidology, excuse me, a little tongue twister there. This was in 2014, but there's a lot more research done on this as well. They provided this to individuals in the purified form, because that's really what you want to do, is give it to your patient. And it was known to be extremely useful treating high triglycerides in the serum, but also beneficial in lowering the low-density lipoproteins and also C-reactive protein, acting as an anti-inflammatory. So this test is going to give you information on how much omega-7, like I said on the previous slide, is in their system, and do you need to increase or prescribe omega-7 via macadamia oil or other sources. So good information there. Now, the NutrEval test is also going to take a look at oxidative stress markers. Such as glutathione. I'm sure you know that is the super antioxidant in the body. It's also going to look at lipid peroxide, and that causes damage to the tissue. This one right here, it's where you see 8-OHDG. Well, that stands for 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. And if that thing shows up high in the urine, that is a marker of DNA damage. In other words, via oxidative stress. It's a wonderful marker, and you can explain that to your patient that they're not going to be repairing themselves very well, and the DNA is being damaged. And finally, looking at the elemental markers, and I talked about this, the nutritional nutrient elements. You'll look at whether they're replete here, and also toxic elements. It'll evaluate is there lead, mercury, antimony, arsenic, cadmium, or tin. And we know we're all exposed to that. So it's a very complete, comprehensive test. Now, the advantages of ordering this test, in other words, why would you want to order this test? Well, one, you may want to order this test because imbalances generally are going to precede standard laboratory panels. In other words, the blood, I call the blood, when I teach blood chemistry, as kind of the great thief. The blood likes to grab whatever it can to maintain balance. In other words, calcium. The blood will take calcium from the bones to maintain its calcium level, because it doesn't like to shift around a whole lot. And you will see that the NutrEval test can pick up nutritional deficiencies prior to most standard laboratory panels, because of the way that the blood works and wants to keep its nutritional status up and running. Now, the comprehensive nutritional assessment, it's going to give you needs, functional needs for nutrients, like I talked about, how much B12, B6, folic acid does the patient actually need, because it's going to give you that personalized nutritional recommendations, like I talked about, based on biochemical individuality. And here's what the test looks like when you get it back. They've really kept it fairly simple, easy to read. So let's take a look at that. In green, that's the normal amount that the patient should be taking on a daily basis. The yellow is borderline. In other words, this individual has borderline need for vitamin A and carotenoids, vitamin E, tocopherols, thiamine, and also B12. And now over in the red, very high need for folic acid, which is also known as B9, and also vitamin D. So it's going to give you a really quick, easy to read what's going on with the needs for targeted nutrition for your patient. Next, they will give you some supplement recommendations, but I always caution that you're the clinician and it's up to you to make that decision. But it does give you a good read on the recommended daily nutrition and what you may want to increase, like vitamin A. I talked about that there was a borderline need because it was in yellow, so this patient may benefit from additional vitamin A. Definitely folic acid. there was a need based on the chemistry of increasing folic acid, and in this case, to 1,200 micrograms as opposed to the daily need for 400 micrograms. And this is the second part of that report, by the way. The essential fatty acids, omega-3 was low, so it recommended doubling that for its daily need. They also found there was a need for probiotics, and also pancreatic digestive enzymes were needed. And of course, I showed you vitamin D was needed based on the analysis. It also can give you the analysis of amino acids and the needs for amino acids. In this case, there was a need for glutamine and glycine, and by the way, both of those are needed for the synthesis of glutathione, the antioxidant. So that's maybe why this patient may be under oxidative stress, because it's using up the glutamine, glycine, and by the way, cysteine is also needed as well. There's 3 of them to make glutathione. Next, when you get your the report back, gives you it goes a lot further, and you can take a look at the specific vitamins and minerals and their needs. Now, what it'll do, this time it'll be in bar graph form, which you've already seen that this patient needed vitamin A about 5,000 units per day. But what it'll do is it'll break it down into these 4 categories you see here. First category is the function of vitamin A as a refresher. Second is the cause of the deficiency. So in this case, vitamin A deficiency may be caused by such a chronic alcoholism, could be a zinc deficiency, hypothyroidism, or the use of oral contraceptives containing estrogen and progestin. And then it'll go the complications of the deficiency, so you can kind of take a look, is this what's going on with this patient as well? Is there some difficulty seeing at nighttime? Is their immune system not doing very well? Is there problems with healing and tissue regeneration? Patient complaining of a lot of infections all the time, high risk of infection, or leukoplakia. That's those little white patches in the mouth that you, when you do your examination, that you'll see, or keratosis. But it also lists foods that that you may want to have your patient augment as a complete source. So in other words, aside from just giving them vitamin A, you may want to include some cod liver oil, eggs, sweet potato, pumpkin, carrots. Make sure they're getting these foods into their diet. So it'll break down each one of the vitamins, minerals. So I'm going to go over a couple of pages of that so you can really see what's going on. Let you know about coenzyme Q10. It's very, very informative. Glutathione. There was a need for glutathione. Remember on the page before, glutamine and glycine were low on the patient, and this patient's probably under some oxidative stress as well. And here we go. It'll look at the B vitamins, B1, B2, B6, and biotin. Again, I'm not going to read all of these to you. You can, when you get the test back, you can take your time and to look over those. It just as a refresher, because this is a lot of information to retain, but it's all laid out for you very nicely with these bar graphs. And again, the thing that I really like is giving food sources, so you can tack those on into the patient's diet, as long as they don't have allergies to particular foods. You need to screen for that as well. Again, niacin B3 and folic acid B9, cobalamin, the need for that. And your minerals, manganese, molybdenum, magnesium, and also zinc. And again, it does the same thing. It's going to look at the function, the sources of cause of deficiency, the symptoms, and also the food sources as well. And more in the fatty acids. Again, I won't read all these to you. I think you got the idea at this point. This all comes back on the report to help your patient. Also looking at the need for methylation. Why is methylation so important? Well, it's needed, as it says here, for DNA, for estrogens, for neurotransmitter metabolism. They're all dependent on methylation. And if you were to pick up or order the SNP test for the methylene tetrahydrocannabinol folate reductase, knowing that your patient has a higher need for methylation, because methylation, again, is needed for the synthesis and repair of DNA. Estrogen metabolism, neurotransmitter metabolism, are all dependent on that. That's what the big thing is with methylation over the last 10 years. Very, very important. And here, I included this slide in here just to give you an idea of how they're able to figure out the nutritional needs based on this testing. And this test kind of seems like magic, but I want to just go through this very briefly with you. Here's our food sources, obviously: fats, carbohydrates, proteins, And on the bottom, which should be in here, is ATP. The goal is to produce energy, which is all the way down on the bottom, right here. Now, you may remember your biochemistry. This is the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation. That's which produces energy. But all of this above is needed to produce energy. So let's say let's go to carbohydrates first. So carbohydrates, that's the first choice of energy. That, as you go through glycolysis, you may remember that there's a substance called pyruvic acid. Now, pyruvic acid will be converted, and it needs vitamins and minerals and enzymes, and in this case, it needs B1, B2, B3, B6, and also lipoic acid. You'll see them listed right here to make this conversion to pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. Now, acetyl-CoA goes into this thing called the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle, right? That eventually goes into this electron transport train. This happens in the mitochondria to produce ATP. Anywhere along this path, like we'll take pyruvate going to acetyl-CoA. If there's deficiencies of magnesium, lipoic acid, B1, B2, B3, or B6, what's going to happen is pyruvate is going to report as high on the test. That's how they figured out that there was a need for these vitamins and minerals and lipoic acid as well. Also keep in mind that there could be other inhibitors. And in this case, arsenic, you see here, I don't know if you can read that, it's AS, and mercury, and that's antimony, by the way, SB, can block this. And we're all subjected to environmental toxins, so keep that in mind. So when they get these blockages in this pathway, pyruvate would be high on the test, on the laboratory test. Fatty acids, they actually get converted to acetyl-CoA. Proteins get converted to acetyl-CoA going down this pathway. If there's a blockage here, that can be a sign of a carnitine or magnesium deficiency, because that's what's needed as a cofactor for fats to be converted to acetyl-CoA to go downstream. So I just want to give you an idea of how they're able to look at these organic acids and give you an idea of vitamin deficiencies, because vitamins are cofactors for all of these reactions. So hopefully that was helpful. Now, you'll get back even more information, the malabsorption. This is like the organic acid test. If you're familiar with that, I did that webinar earlier this month. So it'll give you ideas of malabsorption markers, if there's fungus. Here's how this works too. This is arabinose. If arabinose is high, that means that there's yeast probably in the gut, and this is one of the metabolites as yeast eat carbohydrate, essentially. They're going to kick out this particular organic acid, arabinose. And if that goes high, that's how they know, there must be yeast or fungal dysbiosis going on. So that's how that all works. So this is the organic acid test, and this is an explanation of looking at the metabolites. Let's see, detoxification markers. Okay, no, we're good. Again, more metabolites. This is looking at the amino acids. This is the urine. This is what they're able to pick up. Looking at the essential amino acids, not essential amino acids, and these things called these intermediate metabolites. All of this is designed to say that there are nutritional deficiencies, because you got to think of these cofactors that are involved. B vitamins are needed, urea markers, and essential and metabolic fatty acid markers. We talked about that earlier. There's your omega-7. It'll take a look at those monosaccharides and also trans fats, which we certainly don't want in the body. It will take a look at omega-3, the omega-9s, and omega-6s. And it'll also take a look at this cardiovascular risk. There's the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. There's your arachidonic acid, the EPA ratio, and this is the omega-3 index. If all these were high, your patient is at cardiovascular risk. You can show that to them and say, we need to do an oil change here and need to follow my recommendations. Oxidative stress markers, again, this one I pointed out before, that's the 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine marker. That is the one that is involved in the knowing that if there's damage to the DNA, oxidative damage that is, and not DNA not able to repair itself properly, or damage or free radical damage, can be very important. The treatment for that essentially is antioxidants, change the diet, and also detoxify your patient as well. And of course, on the bottom, finally, those are the elemental markers. looking at the nutritional status. What they do is they look at the red blood cell, by the way. The magnesium on the red blood cell is one. Because magnesium is found intracellularly more than in the plasma. So they'll look at the red blood cell where it's mainly found. Magnesium is mainly found in the red blood cell. So they're going to give you an RBC magnesium that's better than the serum magnesium, and to find out what's going on, because that's mainly where it's found. That's why you'll see plasma, red blood cell, whole blood, RBC for potassium, whole blood for selenium, and plasma for zinc, because they know whether it's found intracellularly or extracellularly, and so you get really qualified information. Now, the toxic elements, that's RBC, where they get that from as well, whole blood. Okay. So when you get all that information back, and I know it's a lot, and I know I've covered a lot in a very, very short time, I just want to let you know that Avexia has introduced a nutraceutical line this year, or we have, and you can use these certain amino acids, amino acid complete, B+, there's calcium, minerals, coenzyme Q10, omega, multi-omega, that's your omega-3s that you may need, all based on this test. So when you look for nutritional recommendations, please look to Avexia Nutraceuticals because they're very well researched and they work extremely well. Michelle can give you information on how to order those and look at the line of nutraceuticals. So let's go over just a quick summary of what we've talked about tonight. First of all, the test is used as a tool, like I said, to optimize nutrition and function. It'll give you personalized nutrition, and I really want to stress that you don't want to forget to correct the underlying cause of malnutrition, like what's going on with your patient. It is maldigestion, GI problems, or thyroid problems. So really sleuth out what's going on. You may need to order a stool analysis. Again, and on the last bullet, like I said, you can use this test to improve athletic performance, or if the individual hasn't exercised for a long time and you want to make sure that they're replete so they're not get tired and burned out and give up very easily because they're just flat out fatigued, you want to get the nutrition back up. Great test to do that for. And certainly before starting a metabolic detoxification. Remember, metabolic detoxification requires nutrients to drive the liver to begin the detoxifying process. So it's a good idea to look at a nutritional test such as the NutrEval test as well, or the one test. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. Thank you so much for your time. Hopefully that this was helpful. And Michelle will tell you how to order the test. Well, I don't hear Michelle on the line, so I'm going to go ahead and wing this myself here. If you need to order the test, first of all, go to the website, www.avexiadiagnostics.com, or you can email them at info@avexiadiagnostics.com, and they can talk you through how to log on, and then click through the menu and go ahead and order the test. And here is the phone number. It's 888-852-2723 to contact us for more information. This is Dr. Sedano. Thank you so much for listening.